When you are you locked in place and only able to rotate yourself 360 in the filmed environment, or are you able to move about the environment freely? Oh, you're referring to VRLU specific?
What?
You're asking about VRLU specific?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer that. You're locked in. I know the focus has mostly been educational things like that, fitness and travel with your VR product, but there is now or would be any future interest in partnering with the video game developers or publishers, i.e. Game Freak, TCPI, the Pokemon Company International, Nintendo, etc. I actually asked for the specific idea and vision I've had in my head for several years now. Pokemon games for the past 25 years have been, for the most part, top-tier view or third-person view for the player character. But I always thought it would be so cool to transverse through those worlds and regions that I imagined myself as a child in first-person VR, and being able to take the height and weight data from the Pokédex of each Pokemon and input them in a VR environment, thereby scaling these creatures relative to your player character. That way you could be looking down at a 1 foot tall Pikachu, or be able to look up at 12 foot tall legendary Pokemon like Groundon or...
Don't worry about it.
Yes.
Well, yeah, so first off, in VR and video, the camera position is static, so it does not move, but you are able to look around as long as it's a recorded video wherever you want, so you have full 360 degrees. And with 3D, what we do is we actually take stereoscopic 3D, so we actually have multiple positions. The same way that we see 3D in the real world is we have what's called parallax between our eyes. And so that's created because of our interpupillary distance. So the distance between our pupils sees a slightly different image, which then creates a three-dimensional perspective. So these cameras basically do that so that each eye gets a slightly different angled image, which creates 3D depth. So you can still have not only 360 3D, or not only 360 but also 3D, and then but you are static. And so there are cinematic techniques for moving through, just like you would in a movie, where a camera might actually flow through an environment, and but you have to be a little bit careful with that because it tends to make some people sick, and because there's like an evolutionary response to poisoning actually, but it's a disconnect between what you're seeing and your inner ear. And so there's different cinematic techniques to make sure that you don't cause motion sickness. But there's definitely things to do and best practices that are starting to happen. Your idea is a great example of what is possible with virtual reality, right? Is especially in simulated settings, it's different with games, because with games you can completely simulate the entire environment, everything that you're seeing, whether this be, and that same technology could also be applied later with the right hardware, whether it be mixed reality or XR devices, which allow us to see through either via camera and display or straight up just like a piece of glass with a projection lens on that. You could also create augmented reality, three-dimensional, properly sized Pokemon that are at your feet out in the real world, and you could develop entirely new game mechanics for that once the hardware's there. But definitely today, virtual reality is already at a point where that is feasible. You could create a virtual reality world and have these characters. You can potentially battle them. You could create all kinds of game mechanics, explore the world. And we also have something called 6 Degrees of Freedom now, if you're not familiar with it, which is different from a 360 VR video. So when we take a 360 VR video, the camera is static, and so you can't move your head, right? But when you simulate the environment in virtual reality, you can move your head. So as long as you have a 6 Degrees of Freedom device, like any Oculus Quest 2, there's a bunch out there now. You can actually move forward through physical space, up, down, left, right, and do the same with your hands. So now we can actually, pull a Pokeball out of our pack and throw it, and pay attention to velocity and angle of the hand direction, and when you release with the button and how far the Pokeball goes, and apply physics simulations. And if you mapped out this stage, we could literally draw a line, and I could walk from one side of the stage to the other if we have the space. This is a design decision where I can physically in the real world walk through space, and it's moving my character through the virtual world. So there's all kinds of amazing, this is possible today. That's an example of a great idea for Pokemon lovers out there to live their dream Even if you make up, a new intellectual property that's not Pokemon, you can still learn from the successful aspects of, the innovation of Pokemon. Like, what is it that makes Pokemon successful? Appealing to collectors' mentality and everything, the intellectual property, the interest, and the game mechanics. So you can, even create your own IP if you can't use the Pokemon side. Make your own little monsters game if you wanted to.
I'm sorry, I actually have one more question I didn't think to text, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
What do you, because it's, VR and the headsets have been around for several years now, so what do you think is the biggest hurdle right now for the technology to not be so household like most TVs and regular video game consoles are? Like, is it just it being so expensive, or?
Yes, that's a great question. I think there's, admittedly, personally, and let me know if you guys have thoughts, I think there's a variety of reasons for this, and really every new technology has an adoption curve. So you always have sort of this bell curve of early adopters to, there's it's called law of diffusion of innovation. If you want to look into it, I definitely would suggest you Google it. But this is a natural process where you have the people who are your early adopters and you try to find the product market fit. And with every new technology, this has been around for a long time, really. Like, people have been talking about virtual reality since the 70s. And the hardware is really only now getting to a point where it's commercially viable in a way that's, I think, meaningful. And now, even today, I think there's still some things that have people not entirely sure until they see it, right? There's the size of it. They're not used to seeing it on people's faces. Maybe they feel a bit silly. But once you put on the headset and you experience some of these applications, most people walk away with a sense of awe and like, okay, there's definitely something here. And as the audience grows, I think we're going to see a lot more, adoption. So general interest, getting people to try it, understanding that it's not just games. Anything that we do on the internet could potentially be applied with a 3D layer. So, in virtual reality, utility-based experiences, we just need more software. We need more killer apps, because killer apps sell hardware. People buy consoles for gaming because they want to play very specific intellectual properties. And so the more people that get into VR and build these killer apps, the more likely I think we're going to have general user adoption of virtual reality, because people just don't want to live without the software.
And VR is here. So it was one of the most popular Christmas gifts of last year was Oculus Quest 2. It's $300. So you can have, and what's now, a few years ago, you would have had to spend a few $1,000s to get top of the line. You're pretty much near, there are better ones, but you're pretty much near top of the line, fully untethered, right? So you don't have to plug it into a PC or anything like that for $300 plus tax. And so it's here, it's just like smartphones, right? Smartphones came out, there was a certain caliber that had it. And I really think this last year with the Oculus Quest 2, but now Quest 2, now Meta Quest, that's really the critical moment. That is the iPhone, in my mind, that is the iPhone moment. You're seeing now hundreds of thousands and millions of headsets out there, but because there's 7 billion of us, it's taken some time for that to fully permeate across society, but there are people who are already living their lives in virtual reality headsets, in kind of the metaverse environments. That's already happening. People are going on dates, they're getting married in virtual reality headsets. So it's just a matter of time. Every year you're going to have 50% to 100% to tripling of growth, if not more, of the number of headsets you see out there. And again, $300 is huge.
Oh, I thought they were still like 800. I didn't know they were cheaper now.
I'm not sure.
And these guys, they don't want to brag about it. So I will, because I'm the loud Chinese guy. They, when Pokemon Go first came out, they got inspired and they built their own app revolved around Pokemon Go. And within a matter of 2 months, a month? 30 days, they were able to get 500,000 downloads for that app. And the reason why I say that is because, and to further monetize that, but the reason why I mention that is because everyone in the room today, if you've ever had an idea that you were inspired by or you wanted to do something and you just didn't do it for whatever reason, you have to know that you can do these things that you can dream of like they did. There's no difference from them and you other than, at this point, just some experience that you can all have also. So, Angel, and then I'll answer the other question.
Oh, the VR headset went up $100. Then couple,
Yeah,
about a month ago.
yeah. There's a little bit of a backlash on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw.
But now it's still the same price as a console.
Yeah.
And with Pokemon, interesting thing, again, tying back to process, is that was actually something a year and a half before Pokemon Go was even announced. We developed a prototype that was effectively Pokemon Go in a much simpler fashion. So Sunset Park, we were over at Sunset Park, and we made a little mobile app where there's Pokemon that were hidden across the park, and you could go and find them and try to capture them.
You guys did that?
Yeah, so we did that, just us. There were 3 people total who ever saw it, but we did that a year and a half before Pokemon Go came out, because we did the same thing. We were like, okay, well we love that game. Technology is now at a point with geolocation services and tracking that you could actually, the technology's there. That would be a cool idea. I loved that as a kid. And what did I love about it? I loved being able to explore and get out there and go and kind of discover that in the game. And so you just pull those things through, and we made a really rough version that just us played for a little bit, and then we're like, oh, this is kind of a fun, novel idea. Put it in the back burner, and then Pokemon Go was announced. And we were excited about it. We're like, oh, this is fantastic. They're actually doing what we hoped. But that's something where, it was a year and a half before that was even out. We built our own little rough prototype of it. So all these ideas, just follow through with some of these ideas, and you can have some, they can often be absolutely incredible ideas.
Was that around the same time Google Maps did that April Fool's thing with the Pokemon?
I don't actually recall that one.
No, but it was, so Google Maps was part of the inspiration, because we were looking at effectively games on maps as a concept. And, games on maps as a concept was something we were looking at a variety of iterations of. And, the particular, day that we were talking about it, somehow the, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Came up, and we were just like, well, that actually collecting, augmented reality characters like this and doing an augmented reality thing with games on maps would be fun, which was our idea. But so we started making our own intellectual property of like, oh, well, what would that be like? Just to experiment. But it wasn't that specifically, but it was definitely inspired by their team and what they're doing with just the general concept of games on maps.
This is from the beautiful Jen Effer. I had used the 360 still shot camera attached to a cell phone. How far off can we expect to be able to attach a 360 video to our phones?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I honestly don't know exactly how far off, obviously. This kind of depends on who wants to, if someone sees there as being a market and creating, a peripheral device that can be driven by a phone to capture this. And part of this is also figuring out the demand, right? It's just understanding what is the correct answer there. I would imagine as more virtual reality 360 3D content happens, we're going to have more devices, and that part of the market's going to heat up in terms of the hardware that enables capture and the benefits that you get from mobile. But one of the challenges with implementing it, for example, directly onto the phone is if you want 360 capture, you're effectively taking various angles and you're stitching them together. So it's a lot of cameras looking in every single direction. And the amount of data that is significantly more than just like a singular camera looking in a singular direction. And it's even more if we're now doubling that for 3D, where you're now taking 2 different angles at the simultaneously. And so, I would imagine we're going to continue to see innovations like that and ideas like that pop up in terms of most likely peripheral third-party devices that work alongside phones before we see phones do that. Although we have seen some phones that are taking, scan technology where they're capturing things at different times, but it's kind of a different topic than just regular 360 capture. So I'm not entirely sure, but that's my immediate impression of that one.
I think that's the LiDAR.
Yeah,
they do use LiDAR in the iPhone.
Yeah, sometimes they use LiDAR for a variety of reasons, and sometimes even grayscale cameras is better at detecting edges. There's a variety of technologies you can use to create that for sure.
I'll throw in some 2 cents on that.
Yeah, please do.
Jennifer, the 360 editing still is very wonky, in my opinion. I don't think that editing technology is great yet. And nowadays people are creating amazing phones, and there are apps that these guys created too that you can take photos and videos and it'll automatically make a video for you for social media, which is great. But even on a desktop editing for 360 still needs to get better.
You want to know anything on that?
Just check, there's companies like Insta360 That's where you can kind of go, and companies like that are building just custom hardware for 180, 3D videos, 360 videos. So if you want to understand a bit about where we are in that type of content, just Google a company like that, and you'll see very quickly how small they're actually getting already.
And if you're going to Google them, Google it with VR Lou James Shu. They did an article on us too, which was really cool. Speaking of mental health, do you think VR will affect society and personal relationships?
Yeah, so honestly, I think it's a really important question, just because whenever innovations come along like this, part of what we were talking about before is there's obviously the positive consequences of innovations, and then there's also sometimes negative consequences. And I think the reality is any new innovation, any new tool, it's really an amplifier of human behavior if it's successful. And so what behaviors is it amplifying is the question. And so a lot of that is going to depend on how we use it and pay attention to a variety of factors, which I think the reality is just like any tool can be used for bad or good, probably both will happen. In virtual reality, I would actually expand the question from virtual reality to just immersive devices. So this is both augmented reality, once we have glasses that have these kinds of information that display in our field of view. Might be really nice to see arrows on the sidewalk giving you directions instead of looking down at your phone. There's philosophical arguments of, we stopped doing this and we're now in the world, we're looking at people, we're not, if it's in our field of view and we're not, quite as distracted potentially. But the reverse could also happen if we design these things wrong. And if users want to be inundated with constant notifications, there's absolutely implications to mental health. Getting too many notifications at any time, or separation from people, or it's developing social skills. But so what's interesting about it though is that there's a ton of evidence showing kind of the reverse is also true. So people who are generally like less social, for example, tend to be more social in virtual reality, and they can actually work on their social skills. And so we can take human behavior and we can be cognizant, like addiction to mobile phones is real, and the same thing could be true for virtual reality. And so just trying to curb that, be aware of that, awareness, design things not based on retention but for value, I think is an important thing. And then really from there is just recognizing virtual reality can bring people together. Augmented reality can bring people together. And we can make this stuff more accessible, but we should design with the intention of doing more good than bad, and I think that's how we actually accomplish that.
And we just earned our URL on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, here's my commercial. It's youtube.com/Wondour, WONDOUR. And so we just earned our URL, so you can just go to youtube.com/Wondour, and we go over so many amazing questions. And one of our co-hosts, Miss Emily Chandler, I can see she's in the background. She talks about product development and taking an idea of a product and make it become a fruition. She's pushed a little over $250 million worth of products for different clients here in the United States and Korea, which is exciting. And then these guys, they talk about Metaverse, and they talk about, we just did a video on hospitality, Las Vegas, AR, VR, where that's gonna go, and then transitioning also into how Budweiser, Carl's Jr., McDonald's are getting into the NFT game, and how that really is pushing their business because they know what the future is. And the reason I mention that is just because some of you guys right now have amazing ideas in your head and may not know exactly how to translate that into Web3 or the future. But if you watch a lot of these educational videos that these guys have put together, and Emily, I think it can really get your brain churning and really get the noggin going of different ideologies and how to really prescribe that into whatever you're trying to do. So let's answer 2 more questions, and then I will leave you guys be. Is the metaverse going to be required, similar to how a smartphone is today? Meaning, like, you know how, like, you really, okay.
Sorry. No, I think it's too early to tell, admittedly, to say so with any kind of certainty. I do think that there are certain benefits that are going to be hard to compete. So like there's going to be specific industries where virtual reality you might not expect is indispensable. And so like as an example, the glasses that we showed you guys, the electronic glasses, we designed those using 3D modeling, and we got into VR together with people across the United States and put that 3D model in front of us in a way that made it feel real immediately. And we would reach out, float it in physical space and grow it, point at things, turn it, talk to each other, break it apart. And it's those reality bending things that I think are going to be, potentially most useful first. I don't know if virtual reality is going to be like that, but I think the answer is more than likely no, other than for maybe productivity things specifically. Augmented reality is a different story. Pass-through devices, glasses, when James's glasses are actually his phone, and they're talking to his AirPods, and he can pull up any size screen right here, right now, and it's in physical space, or he can dismiss it, where he doesn't have to do anything other than interact with natural gestures in physical space. He can bring his laptop along with him, cloud stream to that device. That's more likely to me to be something that you can't avoid in the future, because you just have more instant access to the world's information. It's actually faster than reaching in your pocket and pulling it out, right? And that's the key, is what are those aspects that make us human that you can't avoid? We're going to want and need access to information. We're going to want and need access to communicating with each other. We're going to want to be near each other, whether we are or aren't. So, phone calls is kind of, in a way, it's our ability to communicate. And that, these glasses, when they can put me in hologram form next to him and vice versa instantaneously, these sort of things I think are going to be unavoidable, and you're just going to be that much faster and more efficient as a productive member of society once that is fully developed and matured as a technology.
On the commercial side, if you think marketing, go where the eyeballs are. So necessity is one thing, but if you want to be successful as a company, you need a website, right? And then that's now the standard brick and mortar. Without a website, you don't seem like you're legitimate or don't seem like you exist. Also, a lot of people develop mobile apps, same reason. There's billions of eyeballs looking at mobile apps every day. I think the same thing when you apply any new technology, it's going to represent some portion of eyeballs. And if you want to market a product, you want to push that forward, you need to be there. Nike did this, for example. They built Nike World in Roblox. And they've had millions and millions of people visit and actually transact, and they're tying that to NFTs and physical and digital purchases. And they don't have to. They didn't have to go into that. It's not necessary. But that's where the eyeballs are. And they go, and they're having a huge economic upside because of that fact. So I think for that reason, virtual reality, a necessity, is relative to your degree of success and your degree of reach and who your target audience is.
It looks like there's about 6 more questions, but it's already 3 o'clock, so we'll answer these questions, though, in a YouTube video on our channel, youtube.com/Wondour. Please subscribe. With that being said, I wanted to first, let's give everyone who's in attendance today a huge round of applause for taking your time out to be here. We know that you guys could all be somewhere else, but you've taken your time out here, so I hope that everyone got some good value out of today and learned something and things like that. Number 2, let's thank Dylan and Taylor for putting together their piece for Wondour. Awesome.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
All right, James.
And then one more round of applause for Marcel in the back for the library, letting us use this facility. I'm personally a huge fan of this particular venue. That's why I always do it here, just because this theater is so nice, and they put everything together for us first class. So I love it. So with that being said, if anyone has any questions, these guys will still be around for maybe the next 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to have the lights up in a minute. I'm going to grab Kent, and I'm going to go to the exit. Before anyone leaves, if I could get a photo with everybody so I have photo evidence that this really did happen, and I would appreciate that. Give yourself a round of applause.